The very essence of the mental game is this. The only reason an event matters is because we make it matter.
Welcome to the Mullins Farrier podcast, where I will sit down and converse with the superstars, the overachievers, the masters of our craft. Each episode will be a deep dive into their personal philosophies, their habits, the tools they use, and the secrets to not only their success, but overcoming failure as well.
First, find somebody you can mimic, then find somebody you can stand, and then try to focus on one style until you master that style.
So if you say I can't do something, well, you're absolutely right. But if you say you're going to, you're absolutely right with that too.
People say that you shouldn't define yourself by your work. That is not true.
You know what Dave Farley does when he's, lucky enough to be at the World Equestrian Games? I'm watching other people work.
Yeah.
I don't think we do that enough.
This podcast is for all of you out there who share my passion for the job and the desire to always improve. These interviews will put you in touch with the inner workings of the role models we all want to emulate. So let's get to it.
There's only so many hours in a day, and it's a matter of what you do with them.
Welcome, everyone. I wanted to start this episode off with a term we use in my practice. Unfortunately, we don't get to use it often, but it is always exciting when we do. Let me explain. A brief career as a sound and lighting engineer doing live acts, followed by a career hammering metal and using all the power tools a non-purest farrier does, has led to some hearing loss for me, and I often don't hear what people say properly, and my creative brain fills in the rest. Often this leads to some pretty funny misinterpretations of what people say. One day, two of my shoeing compatriots were talking as I came into the barn, and one of them, a highly skilled chap from England named Pete, was talking about getting the fit on the first burn. What I thought he had exclaimed was, "Portuguese touchdown." Two words that probably have never been uttered in conjunction with each other in any language ever. But they stuck and became our triumphant call whenever someone got the fit on the first burn. My guest today probably has more Portuguese touchdowns than most, but I suspect he wouldn't settle for less than perfect before he proclaimed it. This will become clear from his favorite Bob Marshall quote. Minnesota Farrier Mark Thorkildson, CJF, AWCF, is my guest today, and I have had him on my hit list since the podcast started. We were hoping to be able to do this interview in person, but alas, a pandemic got in our way. Mark was an examiner when I did both my CF and CJF exams down in the Heartland, and as you will hear, he was key in helping all of us to settle a bit once he gave us his introductory talk. I wanted to have an episode to explain the process of the various levels of certification with the AFA, but it was hard to peg someone down to do it. Mark graciously agreed to take on the task, and I hope it helps some of you to understand it a little bit better and inspires you to go down the certification path. During this part of the conversation, I said the word subscription instead of prescription something like 3 times, and normally I would leave something like that in the capable hands of Heather at Twisted Spur Media to edit and dub in the proper word. But I thought I would try my hand at it and give Heather a break for this one. Let's see if you even notice it. Anyway, Mark was as awesome, inspiring, and full of wisdom as I knew he would be. I hope you enjoy the conversation as much as I did. But I thought we'd start with something unusual, which was our conversation about the fact that you have done a bunch of home renos.
Yes.
And then that's kind of what you do in your spare time. One of the things, I'm sure.
One of the things. And it's not necessarily even something that we really set out to do. Jen and I bought our first place, I think we were 24 years old. Unfinished basement. Older, probably 70s ranch style house, and got in, cleaned things up, updated the main living area, and pretty basic facelift. We weren't moving walls or anything. Got that done, decided to finish the basement. And actually, her dad helped out a bunch because he had done a fair number of those. So kind of went through all the steps, and probably we finished that one quick. It was maybe 13 months start to finish on that house. Plus, and also, it was a little 3-acre property that wasn't set up for horses. So put up a little barn, fencing, that sort of thing. And then we had just finished that. Yeah, it was just a tick over a year. And then another place, a lady that I shot a bunch of Arabian horses for, was going to sell her place. So then it was like quick sell the one that we had just finished to buy this next one. And that was really a cute little house, but extremely poorly maintained. Actually, both of our mothers cried when they saw what we had just bought.
That's always a good sign.
Right. I think we probably ate 30-yard roll-off boxes, just throwing their garbage. So they basically just grabbed their clothes and left. And like fools that we were, shouldn't have closed. We've learned a lot through all of these.
Right.
But we closed, and that was our mess. In that place, that really cleaned up cute. That was a mid-40s built house.
Oh, wow.
So really, really beautiful, rich oak floors, oak trim. I mean, a ton of character. So I think we spent probably the better part of 3 years doing that one, and then started having kids. And that place was great, except for the house was maybe 80 feet off a busy county road.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, not a good place to be raising kids. So we ended up, and where did we go from there? I think that's when we built the house. And then lived there for a while. And it just kind of then we kind of realized at this time that we were getting pretty good at it. My wife, she's got a beautiful eye for looking through things and seeing the finished project and how all the little pieces come together, where I'm super linear, where I can do one thing at a time. So it's like she's got the vision and I can build stuff.
Okay.
That third one in, we kind of realized like, hey, we've kind of got a little bit of a skill set here. So
right.
Let's run with that. So I think now the total, we've done 8 remodels and built 2 houses. This last one that Jen was, she ended up being the general contractor on it. So we literally built that.
Wow.
Without a contractor. So yeah, it was fun. We lived in a 30-foot camper on the property because we couldn't start building until we sold our last house. Just in case anything went wrong. It's like shoeing for a living, one bad kick, a broken leg.
Right.
And you've got all this heavy debt load. The risk of losing everything is all right there. So
yeah.
Just kind of doing the steps in a row or, however they should be done. So we ended up selling our house. We were like legit homeless, living in a camper with 2 kids that were in middle school, 2 dogs. And yeah, I think it was pretty cool to have the kids watching their mom build this place. And it was actually a really good experience. I think we were start to finish, and the house was 100% done when we moved in. And I want to say it was 83 days.
Wow.
It was fast. Yeah.
Holy
yeah,
jeez.
Really
Okay.
Cool. Yeah, we were blessed with great crews. It was actually a really good experience.
Yeah, you don't very often hear that.
No, we didn't even really set out to do it that way because we had been talking to a contractor, and the day before we were closing on the sale of our house, I mean, we were going to be homeless the next day. We had been talking with him, and he ended up raising his per square foot price by, I think it was $25 a square foot. So at the end of the day, it was $100,000 difference. Jen was sitting in his office. She's like, I just don't know what I can do. Maybe I'll just have to build it myself. And he kind of laughed that off and said, oh, you could never do that. And then that just flipped the switch. It's like,
she said, hold my beer.
Hold my beer. Pretty much.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it worked out great.
Well, and when we were talking about this conversation before, and you had mentioned, so it's 8 houses in total, I think you said?
Yeah.
That's a really good way as a farrier, as a self-employed person, to build equity and I'm sure with each one, you would hopefully do better because you've improved that property. And it's a way to kind of create some sort of a padding for yourself, right? Even looking towards retirement.
No, absolutely. And I think, the first couple we kind of got lucky on. At the end of the day, it's, kind of looking at ways that you can make it even better. I looked at maybe getting my real estate license. So it's like trying to get away from paying some of those fees, but not really feasible. But yeah, I think the name of the game is diversifying. You've only got so many horses in you.
Mm-hmm.
So being able to take advantage of that other skill set and keep banking and pouring, what you've made on one into the down payment. So now you've just built up equity,
Mm-hmm.
and then sell that one and then just keep rolling that back in. So it's kind of building that nest egg. The end goal that we've got is the place that we're at now, at some point, actually, we're right now getting ready for a graduation party. Our youngest graduates high school.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you. So we've got probably 4 more years with them on the payroll. That I don't know. It's like I don't know what's next, but eventually cash out of this and then downsize, and who knows what the next step will be.
Right. Well, and I'm sure with each one, as you said, your skill set develops just like shoeing. The first few get a little cumbersome, just like that first horse you're working on, and you really have to think about stuff. And then eventually, as you go, you learn more, you become more efficient at it. I'm sure, like you said, that one house was 84 days instead of 3 years.
Right.
Right. And that's a build it. And I'm sure there are a lot of skills I'm learning through doing the same process myself. There are a lot of skills that just having an eye for things and measurement and stuff that maybe the average person who sits in an office all day just wouldn't have an eye for, right? And then working and building a house.
Yeah, certainly not going to be nearly as efficient as a contractor. But like you said, break it down, take your time, watch another YouTube video.
Yep, those help a lot. Yep.
Yes, they do.
For sure. So how did this all get started? What brought you into the horse world?
That's a really good question. Graduated high school, tried a 4-year school. And it's kind of sounds like a broken record where it's like, yeah, I wanted to be a veterinarian. And I don't know if I ever could have made it. I don't know if I had the academic skill set, but that was kind of what I was looking at as kind of that end goal. Made it through a semester at a state school. That wasn't for me. Tried a local school. So basically after high school, I had pretty much academically just kind of checked out.
Okay.
Yeah. So I was always that kid that could sit on a 5-gallon bucket and watch a farrier work literally all day long, and maybe from time to time get up and go dig through their truck and look at the stuff they've got. So it was something that I didn't know that I had necessarily an interest in, but I did. So after that second failed attempt at college, it's like, maybe I could try this. And at that time, my mother was showing quarter horses, and I had some horses with some soundness issues. So she was hauling to a farrier that was probably an hour and a half from the house.
Oh, wow.
And up until that time, and not to degrade it or belittle it, I had only watched farriers that pretty much worked cold with an anvil on the tailgate of their truck.
Yeah.
I mean, that was what I was exposed to, and it was still cool. But then I ended up riding with a couple times when she'd bring the horses down. And this was a guy, and he was Dr. Bob Rasich, and he was originally from Long Island and brought a lot of that East Coast skill set. So here was this dude, and he was, building bar shoes and pulling clips and doing the stuff that I had never seen. I'm like,
right.
What is this? Yeah, what's this witchcraft you're doing? And this is probably about the coolest thing I've ever seen. So, being exposed to that kind of got the ball rolling a little bit. So, kind of my goal was to go down to school, do this to where I'd be good enough to put myself through college, grow up a little bit, retrain myself to the study skills, go back to college because that's what you're supposed to do, and then kind of do both or maybe just give up the shoe. But it was never a long-term goal to stick with this.
Wow.
Yeah.
And here you are.
27 years later, right?
Wow.
I think I'm stuck. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, and actually it's kind of funny because a lot of the clients, in starting out, the turnover rate is pretty high.
Mm-hmm.
But there's those handful that stick with you through the years. And I think there was one lady in particular that would not really chew me out, but give me a hard time about not going back to college. She pushed for me
Really?
to go back. Yeah, like pretty much every visit she pushed me to go back to school. And I think it was probably 10, 12 years after I'd been doing her horses. She's like, Mark, I don't think you need to go back to school. I think you found your niche. So then I knew I made it.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, I got Carol's approval.
That's amazing. So what started you on the AFA journey?
That's a good question. Because I had originally not gone that route. I had gone with a different association, fresh out of school, got certified there before I left school, and just kind of flailed around. I think it was a convention in Kansas City. What was it, 95? So that would have been, I think I'd have been shoeing probably 3 years. And it was just it was something to do. And I got a membership just to go to that convention. So hopped in the truck, went down there by myself, and I was hooked, getting to that convention, and you're awestruck. And,
yeah.
It's these people that you've read about in the American Farrier Journal. They're all right there. So I think, from 95, I got a membership for that. It hasn't lapsed at all. So it's like, I truly bleed AFA blood.
Yeah, that's amazing. And what school did you go to? You went to Chris's, didn't you?
No, I went to Oklahoma Horsemanship School.
Oh, okay. I remember the first time I met you when I was getting ready to do my CF exam down at Heartland. And you sat down and you guys all rolled in Friday afternoon, and we sat in the classroom and kind of went through the introductions. And we were all, of course, super intimidated. And you sat down and you were very kind of serious looking. And then you said, guys, we're here to help you. We want you to pass. So I must have misinterpreted that. Obviously, you'd been to the school a few times, probably through examining people.
Yeah, I think when I started competing, a couple buddies and I would go down there, and Chris would kind of help get us sorted out with getting shoes ready for that. I'd gone down to Chris's certification course twice through the years. So I didn't go to that school like for my farrier training, but I've got a lot of ties to going down to that school. So even now with being every time I get the phone call to go down there, it's just, there's something about going back to the Heartland.
Yeah, for sure.
It's just a cool place.
Yep. But anyways, that at the end of it all, you actually made us, you could see everybody's shoulders just kind of relax a bit when we realized that you guys weren't there just to fail us. When you put us at ease and said like you would help us any way you can. No, it made for a really good experience, I think, for everybody.
And that's a tough deal because, you get up in front of there and it's just this nervous energy that's in the room, and you just try to, it's like, all right, everybody just breathe. It's going to be all right.
Yeah. No, you definitely helped in that department because it was, like I said, pretty daunting when you all rolled in there. We'd all kind of bonded over a week of the certification course. And then all of a sudden, there's this new group of folks there.
Right. I remember one of the times that I went down there for the cert course, I mean, the exact same situation that you were in. And John Voight was the examiner. So it was, I think, Friday, the course was done. We went out to lunch in town in Lamar.
Yep.
Everybody's laughing and joking and having a good time. And all of a sudden we saw John Struck come into town, and Chris just said, "Oh, there's the examiner." And, well, nobody talked.
Yep.
I mean, it was just a silence at lunch. He wasn't even in the restaurant, and we were still that way. So, I do remember what it's like to be on the other side of it.
Yeah, for sure.
So trying to dispel.
No, it helps that you guys all have to go through it too. So part of the reason why I wanted to have you on here was to sort of explain to people what you got out of doing the certifications And then what compelled you after that to then, I mean, you're basically donating your time. I don't know what the perception is of other people, but I know you guys either lose money or break even when you come and do these exams. And we all know it's a weekend or a day, and usually there's a bit of travel in between as well. And what is it that compels you to keep doing that and to help certify other folks?
And you're right. If you break even at the end of the weekend, you're doing really good.
Yeah.
Things kind of come in waves. I've had years where I've done as many as 12 to 14 examinations.
Holy.
That's a lot of weekends away from home.
Yeah, that's a lot of time.
I truly do love the process. And I think what got me started after I passed my CJF, I was just kind of dealing with some stuff, maybe testing under somebody that wasn't quite sympathetic to being a candidate.
Mm-hmm.
Just kind of looking at how would I want to have been treated as a candidate. And it was a different deal then. And I don't want to say like I was ever treated unfairly, but maybe treated unsympathetically.
Yeah.
Yeah, with a not passing situation, having somebody, you've got a candidate that's poured their heart and soul into a job for an hour or 2 hours, and somebody not treating that candidate with respect.
Yeah.
Afterwards, and I've been on the failing end of it. The failing end sucks.
Yep.
When you're in the heat of it.
Yeah.
It truly does. And just knowing how I felt being treated that way, it's like, all right, I think I can do this, and I think I can do a good job of it.
Yeah.
Just remember what it's like wearing those candidate shoes. So that's what got me started down the road of being a tester. The examiner thing, I never thought in a million years. And I got a phone call. Greg Burdett was the chairman at the time. And I want to say that was 2013. And he had hit me up to see if that was something I wanted to do. And I certainly didn't think so. Jen had actually pushed me. We talked about it at length. And the kids were late elementary age. So it's like there's going to be a bunch of time away. And, it's like, how much time did I want to miss with them?
Yeah.
Tend to be kind of a homebody. That no, she pushed me to do it. So I ended up starting that process. And I absolutely love it. It's the certification, that whole journey. And it's one of the things that I've said quite often that candidates, I'm truly jealous of their situation and what they're going through. It's like when you embrace what you're going through, and you've done it too with like the certification
Mm-hmm.
course, and now bringing people on through it. It's like the connections that you make, the people that you meet,
Yeah.
the skill set that you acquire. It's complacency in this profession is a very, very dangerous thing.
Yep.
And you start evaluating every foot, every horse, every day, and you're just always striving for more, for better. It's pretty cool.
Yeah. No, I'm sure guests of the podcast will get sick of hearing me say it because I've said it several times, but you really don't know what you don't know until you start that process. You start really delving into the book and reading it in like all the textbooks in a way to actually memorize and be able to regurgitate the information. And it just becomes a whole different process and a whole different way of learning.
Right.
And yeah, having somebody else assess your work. Your clients, if you've got good ones, can make you feel like a superhero. But until you actually do that process and have your peers judge your work, even if the prescription isn't necessarily what you are going to do on your particular type of horses, like those types of fits, I can't do on the jumpers that I do in this country, in this environment, or it would be just considered too tight and I would lose clients. But being able to shoe to that prescription and to that standard, it made me a better shoer on the ones that I do at home.
Right. In certification, the AFA is telling you how you will shoe that horse, to have a consistent product, a judgeable job, to take the subjectivity out of it.
Yeah.
Everybody will fit this way. But I think on an everyday basis, exactly what you had just said, I don't fit like that. I think we're shoeing similar horses, and it's going to be way too tight, way too short.
Yeah.
But it's having that goal in mind, that picture in your head of what the completed job is as you're going through the trim. It's like, I want to fit like this. And even if you're going to back up under the toe a little bit, it's like, okay, this can be set back 1/8 of an inch. And it's working hard to attain that goal.
Yeah.
And it's like, if you plan to come back under 1/8 and then you slide back behind the white line, it's like, all right, what do you do? Do you rock on, or do you pull that shoe and fix it?
Yeah.
So, I think that process teaches you, it's like, all right, that's not good enough. We'll pull that shoe off and we'll fix that.
Yep. Yeah. I, even just the trim, I felt that the only way I could really truly practice for it was to approach every horse and every trim like I was going to have an examiner look at it afterwards. And then when you're under the gun and under duress in the testing situation, you just automatically do what you do every day, all day, every day. But it really changed my perspective on my trims, because you all of a sudden start looking at them with a much more critical eye, trying to sort out what could somebody find here that isn't going to pass, or where are my dips and valleys? You start to learn where your weak spots are pretty quickly. And especially if you go through the process with friends, I think too, like the learning process.
Yeah, that's where it comes in. It's getting around other like-minded people and working together. And yeah, it's like we all have our tendencies, but then you have somebody on the outside looking in. It's like, well, you do this, you leave that medial toe high.
Yep.
All the time. Yeah. Or you cheat your medial or whatever. You're not coming out and around with your shoe.
Yep. And you might even get a little bit ego hurt and offended. And then you look at it a little bit longer and like, yeah, I think I actually am doing that.
Yeah, good times.
Yeah. I had a good friend of mine tell me one time we were having drinks and he said, Brian, you leave the heels too damn long. And we almost got to fisticuffs during the conversation. And then I thought about it afterwards and corrected my trim because it needed to be corrected. So thank you very much, Phil, by the way.
Farrier friends aren't always the kindest, but
no, exactly.
But they'll always have your back.
That's true. I do find that, especially in the competition world, criticism comes pretty easily, and you can be easily offended if you're not aware that that is just the culture. Those people are criticizing, but it's in a constructive way, even if at first it doesn't seem that way. So your competitive career, when did that start? After that convention?
No, it was a little bit later. It was probably 5 years after that. And kind of did some little local ones, but the first big one that we had gone to, I think, was 2004 or 2005. We went out to the Four Corners contest in Durango, Colorado. And that was, so I'm in Minnesota. I think we had probably 6 or 7 of us that kind of carpooled out there. And it was just the gas that got me hooked. Yeah. And did a fair bit of that for probably 5 or 6 years. But then the certification stuff kind of took over, and it was just hard between shoeing, between kids, between the certification and competing. It's like, guys only got so much time that you kind of pick and choose what you can do. And
for sure.
So the competition kind of went by the wayside a little bit. And it's one of those things that's still bugging me. It's just, I've still got that itch to go.
Really?
Now that the kids are older and I got a little bit more time. But you talk about daunting and you look at the skill set of what's happened, the last 10 or however long the WCB has been around. Then you look at what Craig's done to that standard here in the States. It's amazing.
Yeah.
The quality of what's getting turned out in just such a short time. It's neat, but you get off the bus for a while and it's pretty hard to catch back up and jump back out there.
Yeah. You might be amazed though, how quickly you catch on.
I'm not so sure, but be fun to find out. That's for sure.
Yeah, it would for sure. Now with the competing, you obviously had to practice a lot for that. How did you balance your life in order to make time for that?
Coffee and Copenhagen. No, and my stuff, I'm not one to wake up at 4 and go out in the shop. It's kind of get up right hour or so before the first stop. So my stuff was always late at night.
Okay.
Get done showing for the day, come in, hang with the kids, whatever, tuck them in, and then I'd go out to the shop and spend an hour or so there at night.
Okay. And you made that just a routine, basically?
I tried. Yeah, I certainly tried. Every day, probably not. 3-4 days a week is probably a little bit more honest answer.
Okay.
Obviously, if you're cramming for a competition or something, then you do it a little bit
Then
more.
you cram.
Then you cram. Yeah.
And did you ever implement Handmaids into your regular shoeing practice? Was that part of it, or was it more use the keg shoes, get that part done, the earning a living part, and then go home and forge?
And probably for the Journeyman, after 2 failures for missing heels, and I was doing just that. It's like I would go home and I'd make lots of plain stamp shoes, and then I'd come out, the next day in the field, and I would shoe a bunch of horses to what I thought the standard was, but never really brought the two together. And after that second failure for the exact same thing, I realized that I wasn't practicing properly.
Okay.
So for that, I did implement, pick and choose those horses that could go into plain stamps, and really work on that system and working on the clock, because we all know at competition or certification, once that clock starts, all bets are off. So then, you said it earlier, we just go back to muscle memory. So I trained myself to be able to do that and know where the measurements were and know what I was doing at what time. And then things finally came through. The handmade stuff has never been, I certainly tip my hat to the guys that are, 100% or at least, primarily handmade. And it's never really been anything that I've been able to do. All I carry is basic kegs, and then anything else, any specialty, any therapeutic, anything like that gets handmade. And whether it gets handmade at the horse or at home, it's probably more efficient to make it at home.
Right.
That's the way I go. So I don't carry a big inventory.
Gotcha. Did you feel comfortable actually talking about basically what the process is for the AFA certification, starting at the certified and doing the CJF?
Oh, sure. So there is a classification that would be a level before certified, and that's a little bit easier way to dip your toe in the water. Same written exam as a certified, but a lower percentage to pass it. Same shoe display, same shoeing. Everything is the same as a certified level, but a lower passing percentage.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So basically, if somebody just kind of wants to dip their toe in the water and doesn't feel confident that they could pass a certified, that would be a good way to start.
And what is that one called?
That is the AFA classification.
Okay.
And that is not a prerequisite to anything. There's no requirement to do it.
Okay.
The first level of AFA certification would be a certified. And that it consists of a written exam.
They changed the written test, didn't they? Like fairly recently.
Yes. That just was changed. Came into last year.
Okay.
It's a new written test for both the certified and the Journeyman.
Okay.
So it's changed up a little bit. That the complaint for a long time was some of the questions on the last exam were a little bit ambiguous. In the last exam, it consisted of mainly multiple choice and some true false. In seeing that on the scoring end of things, that it was not uncommon to see that a candidate would score fairly well in the multiple choice, and then you get into the true false, and it would be a sea of red ink.
Yeah.
And there just seemed to be a disconnect between the two, and that was pretty disappointing to see that somebody had that knowledge base, but then maybe didn't have the test taking abilities.
Yes.
In the past. So the committee decided to write a new set of examinations for that. So there are no true false anymore. So it is multiple choice, and it's really cool now that there's some diagrams, some matching.
Oh, cool. Okay.
Yeah, some structures. So it'd be basically, and those are multiple choice. So you've got the list of correct answers right there, but it would be a diagram and label these structures. It's not an examination about how well you take exams; it's how well you know the material.
Yeah, gotcha.
So it's a lot more straightforward.
Yeah.
So back to that. So the certified written exam, the areas covered are the bones and joints, hoof structures, tendon ligaments. There is a bit on circulation, pathology, horseshoes, and then conformation and gaits. So the material covered has not changed. So it's still the same structures, the same things that you'd need to know for the last exam.
Okay.
Then there is the shoe display. And the shoe display, in my opinion, is probably the most beneficial area of the certified level, because it's tough.
Yep. People think
So-
it isn't. I've heard a few people tell me that they were going to do their certified and their journeyman, and the certified bogs people down when they start doing those modifications.
Right. And especially fit to the specifications
Yep.
spelled out in the book.
Yep.
It's hard. But, well, basically from dodgeball, if you can dodge a wrench, you can dodge a ball, right? That shoe display. So the modifications, they're spelled out in the latest book that we've got. It's the 13th version. It's from 2008. So all the modifications are in that AFA study guide. The fitting requirements are in there. And the thing to know about that when you're reading in the book, it's like those are scored very literally to how the book is written.
Yeah.
So that is our criteria to score off of. So then once those modifications are all passed, then you would have an on-site demonstration to where one modification is chosen and a pattern is chosen, and the candidate would then have 30 minutes to fit that modification to the pattern.
Right.
And it's the same fitting requirements as in the original shoe display. And then there's also an explanation part where then a tester would ask a series of questions about the modifications on the shoe display, as far as, confirmation that would dictate uses, maybe some alternatives. Could even get into how you make those. So it's seeing that the candidate has a full knowledge of all the modifications on the shoe display.
Yeah. And the really cool thing about that is, to this day, I like some of those modifications, you become so proficient at them because you've practiced them for this exam. Some people don't realize this, but before you actually have a shoe board that is worthwhile showing to the examiner, you do go through a lot of shoes. You burn through a lot, and the specifications are pretty specific. And in order to hit that mark, you really have to do it over and over again and sort of work out all the kinks that you sort of run into. But then once you do that, when you're asked to do a trailer on a specific horse, it all comes back to you.
Or pull clips in the field.
Yeah.
Without totally destroying nail holes. And you'll have to have an understanding of pitch, and everything will come together. And if you can fit to the requirement in the book, it can't help but help your everyday work.
Yeah, exactly. And then the daunting part, the practical.
So the practical, the practical is 1 hour, and you're shoeing 2 feet. The beauty of that is you can shoe with keg shoes. So then that is scored at 3 different points throughout that exam, throughout that hour period. The first section that's scored is a trim score, and that's usually not a high pressure one because the candidate is able to be working on the shoes while the trim is being scored. So then once the trim is 100% ready to be scored, so the trim is done, you've come back after a minute, had another look at it with fresh eyes, because sometimes in the heat of everything, it's a high pressure environment. You might not see something that you see on an everyday basis.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a good idea to walk away for a little bit, maybe get your shoes in the fire, come back, take another look at your trim, and once you're all happy with it, you call a tester over to be scored. You can be working on your shoes while that's being done. The one thing is you can't come over and touch your feet with a hot shoe until that trim has been scored and been passed. The next scoring would be your shoe fit. In that one, you've got to allow a little bit of time because you can't go to nail your shoes on until that has been also scored and passed. But that's, checking the shoe fit, the length, the expansion, your nail hole location to make sure if that's going to be safe, acceptable work to go on that horse. All of these has got to be a score of 70% to be passing. And that's not saying that all scores have to be at least 7. It's just that scoring section has to average 70%.
Okay. As a timing thing, and I can't remember how that went, can you hand one shoe while you're working on the next, or you have to have the pair ready to hand to the examiner?
No, and that's a good idea, because oftentimes one shoe will come much faster than the other.
Yeah.
It's a good idea. Like if you have one that comes right away, have that one scored, and that's out of the way. You can't go to nailing until that second one has been.
Right.
But that gives you a chance where you just can only have to concentrate on that one aspect with that second shoe fit. And then the testers, we talked about this earlier, that the testers we're basically there for the candidate. Well, we are there for the candidate. As far as the scoring, we'll work around the best we can. So if that second shoe is being scored, the tester can score the aspects of it that aren't going to be in your way. So,
right.
Yep.
Now, one of the things that came into play, I'm sure it's the same now, was that the keg shoes are typically unclipped. If you want to have a clip on them, you have to draw it yourself, right? And that clip isn't judged unless it can almost take marks away, can it not?
You are correct. And I think, as a whole, the highest rate of things going wrong at the certified level, it comes in the nailing aspect, where shoes moving around, and namely shoes sliding back off the toe.
Yeah.
The hard thing with that is that affects so many scores, that the trickle-down effect of that. It'll affect your shoe fit. It'll affect your length. It'll affect your expansion. It'll affect nail hole location. So if a candidate is used to clipping every day, then it's not a bad idea. That clip would have to be drawn by the candidate during time, and then it is scored under the shoe fit portion.
Okay. Yeah, and I was not used to using non-clipped shoes, so I actually chose to go that route, and it helped big time.
Yep.
Because then you know exactly where the shoe's sitting. It's not going to move on you back, like you said.
Yeah, it's like...
It does take extra time.
And yeah, once they seem to slide back, they never come back forward.
No, they don't, no matter what you try.
You can always make a shoe come back a little bit more, but they never move forward.
No. Exactly. And then that's it for the certified, right? Okay.
So, and then the last score would then be after time.
Right. With the fit and finish.
Right.
Gotcha. And then there's a certified tradesman, right?
Yes. Okay. And that is for the candidate that doesn't really have a strong interest in doing the handmade work. So it was kind of put in as an interim. It's not a prerequisite for the journeyman. It's not a requirement to do the tradesman. That is a written exam, and it's actually the same written exam as a certified journeyman. And then the on-site would be a 3/4 fullard shoe. The candidate would be given a template to fit. That would be done in 30 minutes to the standards spelled out in the book. The shoeing on that is it originally started off as a 90-minute exam, and that proved to be very, very difficult. So that got moved to a 2-hour exam. So that's 4 keg shoes. They're clipped during time and applied by the candidate.
Okay. Now the 3/4 fullard shoe, I guess that's in place of the bar shoe.
Correct.
For the journeyman. Is that you actually have to hand make the shoe?
Yep, you hand make the shoe, so you'll be given a pattern before your time starts. That will be made during time.
Okay, gotcha.
So that is a 3/4 fullered open heel shoe from appropriate bar stock.
Okay. And to do the Tradesman, you said it's not a prerequisite for the CJF, but do you have to have your CF before you can do the Tradesman?
You have to have your CF before.
Okay.
I would say most candidates go straight from the CF, then on to the Journeyman.
Yeah.
But you don't really see a whole lot of the Tradesman candidates.
Gotcha.
So then on to the Journeyman. That's also both levels. The exam are 60 questions.
Okay.
So it dives in a bit deeper, a fair bit deeper than what the certified, considerably more difficult examination, just required a more thorough knowledge. And then the practical examination, I kind of skipped ahead on that one, but that is shoeing a whole horse in 2 hours with handmade plain stamp shoes. And that would be toe clipped on the front feet and then quarter clipped on the hind feet.
The time was the most daunting part for me.
It's an Iron Man.
Yeah. The bar shoe and the practical. Because you have to do a straight bar, and that's in 35, or is it 30 minutes?
That's 35 minutes.
35, yeah. To a pattern.
Yes. So the shoeing, you're actually given 2 testers will be scoring your work. So you'll have one tester on your front feet, another tester on your hind feet. Toughest part is, as far as a tester goes, is that second pair scoring the shoe fit. Because often that time is kind of running out on the candidate, and it gets to be a bit of a scramble, but it always seems to work out pretty good.
Yeah. Yeah, I can imagine. I'm pretty sure that pretty much covers all that somebody needs to know, just as the basic background. Where can they get a hold of the examination guide?
That comes from the AFA office. You could call up the office. There is a small fee for that. They're a little bit under $16. The nice thing is the office also does have patterns.
Yes.
That could be used for the shoe display. So you could kind of one-stop shop. And there are some other places where you can get patterns. And there's nothing to be said that a candidate can't make their own. There are certain criteria spelled out in the book that the pattern has to have. It has to be made out of metal. There has to be a white line. There has to be a frog. There has to be a defined point of heel. But if it's candidate wants to make their own, that's fine. I do know that the AFA ones are decent, very fittable. Yeah, I think having a pattern that's got a bunch of offset in there, a definite medial lateral, can be a little bit difficult for that criteria, especially like fitting bar shoes and stuff to the specifications in the book.
Right.
Having that can be a little tougher. And there's nothing to be said that a candidate can't go and modify their patterns. We all kind of have our tendencies, in our everyday shoe, and our feet kind of resemble one another after a period of time. Like a Farrier that tends to leave too much heel or something like that.
Well, I don't know what you're talking about.
You can certainly modify those patterns to fit what you want to do. It's not saying, if you buy a AFA pattern, it's not like you have to fit exactly. I mean, you can mess around with that a little bit.
Right. Yeah, because you can grind them. I know some people have ground the clips, the notches for the clips in too, right? So that
all of those would have to be done so it's when they're being scored at the test site, that clip notch would have to sit in there, right?
Be there, yeah. Gotcha. Okay, well, thanks for going through all that stuff.
Sure.
No, it all helps, and I really wanted people to know kind of what the details of the process are. Because sometimes you hear it secondhand or through somebody else, and sometimes the information isn't accurate.
I think oftentimes on the outside looking in, it can be a bit intimidating.
Yeah.
It's tough walking into a room where it seems like everybody knows each other and you're kind of the new kid. What I have seen through all the years, it's a very welcoming group. I mean, there's nobody getting singled out. There's nobody getting made fun of. it's just a good process.
Yeah,
And the people you meet, the lifelong friendships that you make along the way, that kind of stuff is irreplaceable.
for sure. And you do find yourself rooting for each other. Like somebody else's loss, you feel almost as much as if you failed a horse or whatever. You're just rooting for each other.
Right. And the other side of that too, it's your friend passes and it's totally elated.
Exactly. Now, moving on from this, you went another step further and went for your AW.
Yes.
Can you explain that process and how you ended up, like, talk about daunting, read the syllabus for that.
Absolutely. I think for the Americans, it's tough because we don't have the same schooling as over there. There have been some preparation courses that have popped up from other people that have gone through it. I was fortunate enough that Chris hit me up, Chris Gregory, and I ended up doing that first exam that was here in the States, and I believe that was 2010. And yeah, you're right that looking through that syllabus, it was pretty scary. But then Chris had a prep course that I think most all of us that were doing that first one went down to, and he really kind of spelled out what was expected and had some test taking strategies where it's a totally different deal than what we've got. You know, it's basically the AFA test. The AFA is telling you exactly what you'll be doing. We're sitting for that associate's exam. It's more of an examination of, you know, what do you know at that point.
Yeah. It's almost like playing pool where you actually call the shots.
Right.
And have to follow through with them.
And don't scratch.
Yeah, no. So how long did you have to prepare for it?
I had about 4 months to prepare for that one.
That's just mind-blowing to me.
Right. Chris called, and I believe the examination was in October, so it was probably early summer. He had called and he said he really wanted to be in. I kind of laughed. It's like, you just want my money. But it was something that had kind of interested me. I had passed my Journeyman in 2005. That first associate's exam here was 2010. So I had a few years that were kind of stagnant. I didn't really have anything that I was working towards. So I talked to Jen about it a little bit. And then again, you know, she kind of pushed me. I was teetering. And
I see a common theme here.
She pushes me a lot.
Yeah.
No, and I've been super, super blessed to have the support network at home that I have.
Mm-hmm.
It's made things a whole lot easier. But yeah, we talked about it a fair bit, looked at the syllabus. That was pretty intimidating. She's just said, go for it. So once I finally made up my mind, I had to run like hell.
No kidding.
Yeah, it was a whole lot of sleepless nights. It was a lot of fun, but you start going through, and I know you're preparing now, but there's a lot to get ready for.
Yes, there is. I'm doing it with a group of friends, and we pushed our time limit out considerably more than 4 months to prepare. So
you can blame COVID.
Yeah, exactly. So in that 4 months, part of it you explained to me when we talked about this earlier, that you were already competing at that time, right?
Yeah.
So you were tuned up?
Yeah, my forage work was about as dialed in as it ever was. I don't think I've ever really been a top competitor, but if I ever peaked, it was kind of right in that period.
Okay.
So, I mean, that timing was good. And the written exams, that's kind of been my stronger point. So I kind of came into it a little dialed in. I was blessed that Dr. Tracy Turner was working at a veterinary clinic that I was doing a fair bit of work at that time. And he was doing, I mean, he's doing all lameness sports medicine veterinarian. So he was, you know, horse after horse after horse getting hauled in. So he kind of took me and I explained my situation. He's like, whenever you got some downtime. So I go in and work with him on the evaluations. And then when he has some downtime, we go through radiographs. And he was certainly a great, great help on that aspect, which helped out to a great degree in the orals.
Right.
Because, yeah, not only are you taking the examination, you've got 3 examiners wearing lab coats coming and firing questions at you when you're doing these procedures. And yeah, it can be pretty intimidating.
Yeah, you try not to dig yourself into a hole and
right.
Yeah, I've witnessed a few practice sessions with Chris and a student, and actually I was that student one time, and yeah, it didn't take me very long to put myself in a corner I couldn't get out of.
Yeah.
So I need to practice that some more, I think. And there is, Daniel talks about it on his podcast. There's that white coat, what does he call it? The white coat fear or intimidation or something.
Yeah, stuff it's real.
Yeah, when they have those on, the air changes.
And then you realize who's wearing that white coat, and it's like you're just simply not going to buffalo that guy. It's like, oh, you want to go down the hole? It's like, that's fine. How deep you want to go?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So what books did you use to study for that one?
I did all three of Simon Curtis's, studied the Hickmans. Before that point, it was a lot of American textbooks. And then with preparing for that, it was an English exam. So I better be able to shoe like they do.
When in Rome. Yeah.
Absolutely. So yeah, it was all three of Simon's, Hickman's, No Foot, No Horse by Gail Williams and Martin Deacon, Foot of the Horse by Charles Holmes. I think that's the one. So yeah, it was pretty much grab any English textbook that I could get my hands on.
Right. And are you the type of person you can just read it, or would you actually read, take notes? Like, what was your process like for that? Just asking for a friend.
Right. I've found that, that the cramming where you try to sit down for hours on end didn't work for me because I'd be asleep in no time. So it'd be 20-minute sessions. If I had something that I didn't know or I felt could be important, I'd write that down, come back to it again later. But it seems like I've got a lot better retention when I write things down. So yeah, I was certainly taking a lot of notes.
Right. Yeah, it seems to be the way it works for me as well. And then the shoe list that they have, that's pretty daunting too. Like, of the shoes that you could be asked to make, it's a pretty crazy.
Pretty much anything.
Yeah, exactly.
See, and I know that's changed a fair bit since I went through it. And I'm kind of at a loss when that got changed. But I think, was that narrowed down a fair bit?
Oh, I don't know.
Okay.
It doesn't seem it,
Okay.
but it could be. It does seem like it's basically any therapeutic shoe. I'm guessing that through doing the competitions, that would, like, you're going to run into a lot of those shoes practicing for any competitions coming up. But how did you tackle a list that daunting? Like, did you just pick a shoe and work on that for a period of time and then move on to the next one? It's not like you had a lot of time to do it, I guess.
No, the group that was kind of coming together, we worked together as far as measurements. So you kind of have a base, like if the foot measures this, you cut about this, and then you'd make a few to see how dialed in you were.
Right.
But yeah, that shoe lists, we kind of had a handful that we thought, could possibly be, but you had heard rumors from examinations
Yep.
previous. So you kind of go through the biggies and certainly hope for the best, because it's pretty tough to practice and have everything dialed in. But yeah, you take your notes, have your notes.
Mm-hmm.
So you know how much to add or subtract and
Right.
cross your fingers.
Yeah. Here goes. Hope it works.
Yep.
Yeah. I thought about this as I was watching you. You took a sip and you have a chunk of duct tape wrapped around one of your fingers.
Yes.
Is that from one of your knives?
Fortunately, actually, I kind of wish that it was. I got bit by an oxyacetylene torch last weekend at a Tom Willoughby clinic. Yeah, I was.
No way.
Where Tom makes those really cool bracelets and belt buckles with braided stainless steel wire. I was braiding some stainless and was watching the wire and not the torch. And it grazed over my thumb for a second. And it was really funny because there was a 14-year-old that was also part of that clinic. And about 2 minutes later, he came up to me. It's like, wow, that piece of steel must be pretty scary, huh? And I showed him my thumb. It's like, no, but that I wasn't paying attention. And I ended up Googling it. And did you know that the inner cone blue flame on an oxyacetylene torch is up to 6,000 degrees?
No.
It is. That's pretty hot. So, yeah, the skin on the backside of that thumb's a little nasty.
Yeah. So this conversation could go two directions. First of all, I've seen another picture of your hand, or both hands with a lot of blisters on them, but we'll talk about that in a minute. You actually started making knives at some point.
Yes.
In your journey. When was that? I've seen quite a few of them online. Quite beautiful.
Thank you. Years and years ago, it started off where I'd buy frost blades and knock it out of the handle. And it's a decent enough knife, and especially at that time, I think they were $7 or $8. But the blade was so long, and basically, if you think of it, that your wrist is the fulcrum of the workload, that having that length of blade out in front of there, it just puts a lot of extra wear and tear on that wrist, just having that leverage point so far forward. So I would just make a new handle for those and suck that blade back, maybe 3/4 of an inch or an inch, and just make it a little bit more user-friendly. It's the same thing that Halverson was doing with his. So I did that for a while, and I don't know. Oh, yes, I do remember. This goes back to my wife. She came with to the Omaha, Nebraska convention. And what was that, 2006? And I had never really had a good, high-quality handmade knife before. Well, she was walking through the trade show, and she ended up sitting down and talking with, and they were at the same booth. It was Jim Poor and Glenn Spradling. And Glenn Spradling had Prairie Forge knives.
Okay.
And I think she ended up buying 2 of those for me. And like I said, I had never had anything like that. I think at that time there was like an $80, $85 knife, which was, kind of unheard of, or at least in my mind was unheard of. But I got home and I used them, and it was like the angels were singing. It's like this knife was like nothing I'd ever used before. So used them until there was nothing left to give. And I think both blades were about the size of a toothpick, and they finally broke. But I love these knives so much that I couldn't bring myself to throw the handles away. So I just, I was kind of a pack rat. I just threw those handles in a drawer. And I think it was a year or so later, I was just kind of looking at them. It's like, you know what? I could try to do something. So I ended up grabbing, I think I got some A2. It was either A2 or O1. I think it was A2 that would fit in the slot that Glenn had. And I knocked the pins out of the handle, and then I was fortunate enough, the blade was glued in, but I was able to break that glue bond. And I made another one. I made just a copy of what Glenn had done.
Right.
And did a little heat treat, what I thought, kind of read up on heat treating that, and did all the steps, put it in there. And I went to go use it, and it's like, it was beautiful. It's like, this thing works the same way. I'm like, that's really cool. So then I thought the knife making thing was easy. So I used that one. I wasn't brave enough to make another handle, so I just used that one, knocked the pins out, knocked the blade out. And then the next blade was unusable. It was horrible. So then it kind of got me looking. It's like, okay, what constitutes one that works well versus something that you just struggle with constantly? It was that one that kind of led me down that path. I still have that handle all these years later. It's, it's kind of sitting in the drawer. It's not getting used, but yeah, it was Glenn and the quality that he was putting out, that it was like nothing I'd ever used before.
Wow.
Then I looked at some details, and I wanted some certain details in mine, as far as belly, blade shape, blade length, some things that I feel were important to me. So, when you see them, I make what I do because it's what I like.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's
makes
like
sense.
There's a ton of knife makers out there, all different.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just like it.
So once you found the second blade, the beginner's luck had worn out, and that second blade, where did you find your information to improve on it and actually learn where you could correct the mistakes you'd made?
A lot of that was self-taught. I would get, hand them out to friends and get some feedback. Like I was doing some weird things with them. They're like, wow, everything's really good, but that blade really dives hard enough to where I can't use that. So then I'd start looking like as far as the twist of the blade. So when you look at the knife, like straight on, for a while, my blades were twisted down to where you couldn't see the spine, if that makes sense. So then that edge would want to dive down.
Okay.
So what my thought is to try to have the farrier have a very neutral position with their wrist.
Yeah.
And just to be able to go through and peel an apple. So it's really, for the most part, using those and learning how to get them sharp and keep them sharp. I really have like zero wrist or hand troubles. We did have a spell here where we were kind of in a little bit of a drought situation where the feet were ridiculously hard and they had a ton of retained soles in them. So, things kind of fired up a little bit, but for the most part, all these years later, I still feel pretty good. So there might be something to it.
Shantae, who works with me when we're down in Florida, if we had a horse fresh from Canada, she called them Canadian feet because they were so much harder to dig through.
Yeah.
So I figured our environments were probably pretty similar.
Yeah.
Anything you can do to help your wrists is definitely a plus, right?
Right. Yeah. So they've got a pretty sharp blade, and I tend to be kind of a homebody. So it's like, I like being at home. So it's kind of a hobby. I enjoy doing it. When I was getting rolling with my farrier career, I was working in a cabinet shop. So I've always kind of had that interest in the woodworking end of it.
Cool.
So it's like, I've got interest in the metals, the metallurgy, and then the wood. So it's just kind of that perfect thing where it's just kind of makes me tick.
Yeah, it's the combination of all of them. All the worlds collide.
Right.
So the blistered hands I was referring to, this was during my second trip down to Heartland for the CJF run. You were the examiner, and Greg, and I can't remember his last name as we speak right now, but Greg was doing his CJF run and Cooper was watching.
Yes.
And poor Cooper stood too close to Greg's forge and his back caught fire. His shirt caught fire. And I happened to be holding my friend Elisa's horse, and I saw Cooper, I heard him yell, saw him jump down, and he did the first part of the stop, drop, and roll, but he didn't complete it. And this is the first time I've seen a superhero actually in person, in action. You jumped on his back and patted it out with your bare hands. And I should get you to send me those pictures. We'll put it up with the podcast so people can
with a disclaimer.
Yeah.
Look at these pictures at your own risk.
You were out of commission for a while from that.
Yeah, well, and I missed about a week. Yeah.
Yeah.
That right hand that whole palm it was pretty ugly where that polyester from the hoodie ended up sticking to it. And
Yeah.
I think the tough thing was, in that situation, I had forgotten every bit of burn first aid that I was ever taught, where I just stuck my hand in a bucket for about 10 seconds, like, all right, let's get back to work. And,
Yeah.
had I done the right things, right, it's, running under cold water for an extended period. I don't know if it would have been better or not, but yeah, that was a pretty brutal drive home from there.
Yes, I can imagine. And thankfully Cooper made it out okay. And and his dad, they paused, and then his dad finished his run and passed too.
And he passed,
so, yeah. Talk about working under duress.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, that was quite incredible. This portion of the podcast is called the Stratum Tectorium. These are the short answer, surface stuff questions, but it's okay if the guest wants to go deeper. Enjoy. So the first one, what's your favorite book?
The one that I came across when I was preparing for the associates was that one that I referred to as Martin Deacon's No Foot, No Horse. And I can't even remember, why I liked that one, but it just seemed like that whole book covered foot balance. Otherwise, I can go back to high school. And I think the one that kind of stuck with me, non-Farrier related text, was Lord of the Flies.
Yep.
And I think that's such an interesting social experiment that that one is just always, I don't tend to read a lot non-Farrier related things. Actually, one of our hobbies when Jen and I go on road trips is finding these obscure used bookstores and go look for textbooks. I've scored some pretty good ones over the years. Cool. Yeah, it's a lot of fun. Omaha's got some really cool bookstores in there. I think, Lord of the Flies was I think that's the one that just stuck with me.
Yep. At the time, it's funny when you're forced to read those books and do reports or whatever is required. At the time, you don't really appreciate them as much. And then you think about the ideas and concepts that were in them years later and how applicable they are to whatever's going on in the world now.
Absolutely.
And it's pretty interesting. They're timeless in a way. What's your favorite brand of nails?
The ones that I've been using, I use a ton of the Combo 5s, Slims, and I love also the Liberty Hybrid nails.
Yeah. Okay.
If I got that E style, it's like I can't even tell you the difference on what makes it a hybrid. But for me, they drive nice, they fit nice for the shoes that I'm nailing on. They lock in. So
yeah.
So I think those two are pretty interchangeable.
Okay. Yeah, I had a chance to use those when I was down in Florida, but they're not available up here. So it sucks when you get used to a nail you really like and then it's not there. Yeah, exactly. What shoe sizes do you generally have to keep a large stock of?
See, probably my most used size is probably a 3. Yeah, 2s, 3s, and 4s. I nail a lot of them on.
Yeah, sounds like we do shoe very similar horses. Yeah. I'd say the same for me. What's your favorite make of Rasp?
And looking back years ago, Rasp didn't seem like they were such a struggle as what they are now. But I've kind of fallen into that Excel, the blue tang.
Okay.
That's the one for me.
That's interesting. Almost everybody else has been the green tang.
See, and I don't know, that one plugs something fierce for me, but I am left-handed. And I've often thought that, am I using it a different way? Because I know, is it Basoli? Is it Giorgio that makes a left-handed file?
Oh, I don't know.
And I have not used one, so I don't know if I'm using it different than how the file was designed. But I've tried a few of those green ones, and they seem to plug something off for me. So
yeah, and I have the same issue. So part of me wondered if it wasn't environmental.
Okay.
But then there are other farriers up here, like my friend Mike Mihawk. I'm pretty sure he uses that one. So yeah.
Yeah, and I tend to putz and play with the fine side on the bottom of the foot.
Yeah.
A fair bit. So it's that green one's just a little bit fine. The finish work they do seems to be quite good, but it's like I don't get along with it very much.
Bungs up on you.
Right.
What is your dream Farrier rig?
Well, I've got 2 rigs that I use, and I think for my environment it works really good. So spring, summer, and fall, I've got a 6-foot trailer made by Brent Chidsey.
Oh, okay.
That works really nice. And it's, especially when the kids were younger, to have one truck, the vehicles are so expensive anymore that to have one where you could unhook and run to a baseball tournament or a horse show or something else, to leave that at home. What I have found is that there's not a whole lot of tongue weight to that trailer. So on our snow and icy roads, it doesn't pull very nice in the wintertime.
Oh, right.
So a few years ago, 3 years ago, I ended up buying a tub unit for my truck.
Oh, okay.
And had Brent set it up. Beautiful job. So I'll throw that on probably end of November, first part of December. So then I'm not sloshing that trailer around.
Right.
And I've also got the weight on the truck for the snow, because I think it was 3 years ago, we had a pretty nasty winter, and I had missed every bit of 10 days where I get to the end of the driveway and it's like, yeah, I'm not driving in that crap. A lot of my work is, 30, 40 minutes from home. And the thought of, slipping, sliding down there just to turn around and do it again, that was too much time to be missing. So I knew I had to do something else.
Right.
I think with those two, I've got pretty much everything covered. So I'm pretty happy with that.
That's cool. You're the first person who I've talked to who actually has basically based on the season, you have a specific rig for it, but that makes sense.
And yeah, wintertime, that tub unit isn't set up quite as a trailer. It's not nearly as efficient to work out of as the trailer is. But I tend, just with the winters that we have, I certainly don't want to be sitting out of the truck when it's 0 or 10 below, making shoes and putting studs in and trimming snow pads. So end of October through November, I put new shoes on everything.
Right.
That's going to be wearing shoes for the winter. So that way all winter long, it's just resetting.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
That little simple tub unit works out pretty good.
Right. Because of the environment like that, do you have some places where you can actually pull that inside too?
I've got a few, yeah. I tend to feel pretty guilty about it because you're backing into aisles and you've got all this slop and snow and road salt and, all this crap that's locked to the bottom of your truck. And then it'd be one thing if they had a floor drain or something, but it just seems like you've just got this growing mass of goo from under your truck, and then it's like creeping into stalls. And
okay.
So unless it's really bad, I'll tend to leave it outside.
Okay. Gotcha. That's very considerate of you. What's your favorite rounding hammer?
Favorite rounding hammer? I've got a 2-pounder that was made by Josh Stanley out in Montana. I'd be lost without it. It was the first kind of long nose one that I've had. And
okay.
Yeah, it's worked a lot. He had his heat treat down, dialed in. It's just as pristine as the day I bought it. Balanced beautifully. Hits like magic. So yeah, that one made by Josh is pretty awesome.
Cool. What's your favorite type of bar stock to work with?
Well, like I said, most of the shoes that I'm making for horses, it's just kind of, the odds and end, therapeutic, the whatever. My day-to-day, it's a lot of kegs. So most of what I'm making is bar shoes. I really love that bolt stock for bar shoes. Like
do
probably
you?
3/8 by 7/8 bolt stock, yeah.
Okay.
Because you've got a little bit more welding area, you've got a little bit more steel back there.
Yeah.
And it makes a really nice, fast bar shoe.
Okay. Yeah, it's another thing we don't have up here, but I'd sure like to get my hands on some of it and try it sometime. I've heard good things.
Yeah, it's super nice to work with in that application.
Yeah, and that kind of size too. It is a nice dimension. What's your favorite pastime after work?
Probably working on the house or houses or whatever. It's like whatever, just at home, whether it's building something for the house or the barn or something like that. It's, building stuff.
Okay.
I just love building stuff.
So now you worked at the cabinet company, right?
Yeah.
So can you build cabinets and that kind of stuff? Do you get into the woodworking?
It's kind of like a lot of the other stuff that I do. I can do it. Am I good at it? I don't know. But yeah, I've built some cabinets.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
What's the next thing on your bucket list?
That's kind of adventure unknown. I know my wife would really like to pack up and move somewhere. So it's just kind of that balance. It's, and that's a big, scary step. You've got a lot tucked into one area, and just trying to keep your nose clean for, 27-year career and thought of, and if she could have her way, we'd be gone soon.
Really? Yeah.
No, the West and the mountains are kind of screaming. So I don't know. No changes coming up anytime soon. We'll have 2 in college next year.
Gotcha.
And, we're certainly not paying for everything, but that college education anymore is pretty expensive in that the loan system that's out there. is they charge some pretty ridiculous interest rates. So trying to figure out a way, working with the kids, where they can more or less pay their way through and come out with not a huge debt load.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, which is not easy.
No, it's not. But you hear these people coming out with, a 6-figure or more.
Yeah.
In student loans, and what are they charging? 10-11% interest on the stuff. It's
crazy.
You're paying on that stuff for way too long. So I'm trying to get them through and on a good path for whatever they got going.
Yeah. Cool. Favorite brand of keg shoe?
I use a ton of the Kirkhart DFs.
Gotcha. What's your ideal number of horses to shoe all around in one day?
7 or 8 is a good number.
And do you usually have help, or do you work on your own a lot?
I've been on my own more than I've had help. But actually, I've got some cool stuff going right now. I just had a new person start with a few weeks ago. And at our certification, like I'll host one here at our place. And I'll do that a little bit different. So that the exam starts Friday afternoon with registration, with the written exam and that sort of thing, like most do. But all Friday morning, I'll fill up with short 1 hour, like pinpoint talks, like one aspect. It's not showing a whole horse, but it had a lot of times the testers or the examiner or whatever will give talks, and then you're getting different viewpoints, you're getting different subjects, and you're just really kind of hammering that one thing that kind of rings between certification and everyday shoeing. So last year we had a talk by Heather Shoemaker, and she's just outside of Baltimore. And she apprentices with Mike Poe, who was our examiner last year. But Heather gave this talk, and it was mentor-apprentice relationship. And it was this great talk, but she also got into kind of the differences between a helper and an apprentice. And that was really made me think, because the help that I had with in the past most often got treated as helpers, where everybody had their specific job, like pulling shoes. And I would like stop what I was doing. Like if you only have one horse in the cross ties at a time, that the work would stop until their job was done. And then I would go in and do my job, and then they would do theirs. So it was not efficient in the least. So since that talk, I've pretty much been thinking about that nonstop. It's like, how could you make that work where that person who's with gets to learn all aspects of the job,
right? And
gets to get in there and even for short bits. And then the clients are okay with that because things are kind of flowing back and forth and they're fluid. That it's been really cool, because I had somebody new start with maybe about a month ago. So now I can start to implement all these things that I've been thinking about.
Mm-hmm.
And it's pretty interesting, because I think even by her second week, efficiency was back to where it was. So it wasn't like this, and I don't want to say a burden, but having somebody new with, it's kind of gets to be a burden.
Yeah.
So it's been a lot of fun, but I'd certainly credit that talk last year that really made me go back and think about, it's like, all right, I've been doing this, but I think I've been doing it wrong.
Right.
So it's kind of neat to do it different now, and it seems to be working out pretty good.
Yeah. Well, like you just said there, if you can get the efficiency back up that quickly, you're doing something right.
Yeah.
Because I haven't figured that out. Whenever you get somebody new, right.
And then she gets an opportunity transition where it's like, why would I sit on a bucket and watch a pair of shoes get pulled versus I'll tackle the front end of this horse, and when I'm out fitting or doing whatever, then you can climb under that hind end, get those shoes off, do a little bit more than, because now you've got the time.
Right.
and certainly not, I mean, there's still a leash there to some degree. It's as a skill set, that part increases, that the responsibilities will increase, but this will give an opportunity for that person, that student, to do more things to increase that skill set to eventually go on and have a fruitful, successful business.
Yeah.
I think better than how I was doing it before. So I'm super excited.
That's cool. Yeah. Favorite anvil?
I've got a Scott taper heel in the trailer, and that one's pretty awesome.
Okay. What do you use as your shop anvil?
I bought Anvil brand 200-pounder.
Okay.
On a WCB stand.
Gotcha.
Yeah, but it's like I'm on that Scott day in, day out, and it's like I know that one like the back of my hand. And the 200-pound Legend is a great anvil. But you asked for my favorite, not my two favorites.
Gotcha. Do you have a favorite inspirational quote?
I absolutely do. Years ago, we had Bob Marshall do a clinic for us, and that ran for a number of years, and I got invited. So I think I ended up doing probably seven or eight here. I went up to Bob's place, or his son's place in Walmart, Saskatchewan, a couple times, and then we ended up going up to Bob's place in British Columbia. So Bob has been a huge influence on me. I mean, that guy's an absolute legend. But one of the things that he would always say was, "Good enough is not good enough." And that saying that comes back multiple times a week, where it kind of comes full circle to what we talked about earlier with certification or whatever. It's like not settling for less than what you intended to.
Yeah.
The shoe slides back further than you want, or you've got a heel that's a shoe that's just hanging. It's like, I didn't fit that. It's like, do you let it ride, or do you pull that shoe off and fix it? And I hear Bob say, "Hey, good enough's not good enough." So you go back and fix it and crack on.
Yep. No, that is good words to live on. Do you have a Farrier Terrier?
She does not come with, and I think that was kind of the intent when we got her. But my days tend to be pretty long. It's 12-hour days are pretty common.
Yeah.
And I kind of go back and forth. It's like so many of the places that I go to that there's already too many dogs there.
Yeah, so add another to the mix.
Yeah, so she'd end up spending the whole day in the truck. It's like, well, she might as well stay at home where it's comfortable, versus sitting in the cold or the sun, or, we've got a few weeks a year that are really, really nice. But other than that, there's either the heater or the air conditioner's on. So I don't bring her with, no.
Gotcha. Now, you might not run into this now, but when you first started out, possibly, if you were ever stumped on a case or needed backup on something, who would you call?
I was fortunate that I had a handful of really good mentors, and kind of from all different aspects. Probably the guy that I spent the most time with, like right out. So it was Dr. Bob that got me interested into it, but the apprenticeship there didn't necessarily work out. So I ended up working for a guy, and it was big numbers. The forge never got lit, but he was a hell of a horseman, and his extremely highly revered by his clientele. A strong business.
Yeah.
He could really get a lot done. It was really good for my situation because I needed to work on those horsemanship skills, and he just had such a wide array that I learned a bunch off of him. Had another guy who's unfortunately no longer around, but he was a really kind of, out of the box type thinker. He ended up dragging me down to the Bluegrass Symposium for a few years. So it's kind of had that aspect, which is not really the whole AFA model.
Right.
And then another guy north of me who was in was the AFA guy. So it's like whatever type of problem I was having, I had a really good network of mentors that could help bail me out of it.
Yeah.
Super giving though, and the types of guys that, and I think it's pretty rare to find that when the student starts to outperform the teacher, that they're like truly happy.
Yeah.
And I think that's pretty rare to find it. It's like, a number of these guys are that way. So it's pretty cool to be associated with that.
That is cool. Yeah. No kidding. I think in any craft or trade, in the end, if your mentee outperforms you, you've done the right job.
Absolutely.
Like you did your part and helped get them there. I hope I never fall into that trap myself. Do you have a favorite shoe or package on those mystery lamenesses that your clients don't want to either pay for the really expensive diagnostics or?
It's kind of a one-trick pony with a lot of that stuff where I love leather pads.
Yeah, it's a pretty common answer.
And I think I found, especially on the big horses, and a lot of that stuff that you're finding, it's like whether it's, Shelley walls or whatever, and it's a horse that has no depth.
Yeah.
And that leather, you kind of almost add a little artificial depth there.
Yep.
And come back and kind of preserve what you've got at first reset. By the time you come back around, you've got this beautiful hoof capsule.
Yeah.
That I love leather pads.
Yeah. Same here. You're preaching to the choir.
And you can get those up in Canada?
I can. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
good.
Yeah. We've got some pretty good Canadian beef and Canadian leather available. So, although I used to only cut my pads with an X-Acto knife. And when Elisa was working with me, she used to say that we chose only the most hardened bovine leather we could find. I think that both of our wrists have paid the price for that, but
you have a pad cutter now, I hope.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Okay, good.
Yeah. A good friend of mine was working with me and he slipped with the X-Acto knife and sliced right through his thumb. So
it sounds a little dangerous.
Yeah. I went out and bought the bandsaw that night.
Perfect.
Never looked back. What do you use as your planner or agenda?
Pen and paper.
Yeah, pretty common. I'm trying to go electronic right now, but it's not going very well. What's your favorite method of soothing aches and pains?
Take a little Advil here and there, but other than that, it's hair of the dog. Get up and get going.
Yep. Favorite drink?
Water.
Favorite genre of music?
Anything. Yeah, it's like it, and that, totally dependent on mood, but anything from 80s country to 90s hair metal bands to whatever, and anything and everything in between.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's
cool.
Totally mood dependent.
Yep, for sure. Do you work out?
Wish I did.
Okay.
Yeah.
What would you have been if not a farrier?
I think even though my path didn't start off that way, I'd have to be a tradesman of some fashion.
Right. Yeah.
Whether I stayed doing the woodworking thing or out in the field doing something, I don't think I could have done anything like in a cubicle or whatever. I'd have to be out.
Yeah.
It's like pretty much everything I do is outside. So it would have had to be that some sort of trade.
Gotcha. Now, if you had to be stuck in a shop with somebody for a month, who would you want to be there with?
That one I did not think about.
So you're being put on the spot then.
Totally on the spot.
And I have a new question for you once you're done that.
So I'm on the spot twice.
Yeah.
God, I am just drawing a blank. So why don't you hit that other question, maybe simplify.
Okay. Did you meet Shantae Stokes?
I think so.
She got injured a couple days ago pretty seriously. Elisa, who came to the course with me when I was doing my CJF, she was doing her CF.
Yes.
She got injured pretty seriously a few months ago. So a new question. What is something that you do for your own safety that not everyone might think of? It might be something that you just kind of learned through bad experiences or...
I think the big one is having a nest egg, and having 6 months worth of expenses saved up to where, if the unfortunate were to happen, then at least the necessities are covered. Because I did look into disability insurance policy and just kind of playing the odds. I've been at this quite a while now, and I'm pretty darn careful about the horses that I'll shoe. And granted, things will come up. I was just listening to Lisa's podcast just the other day, and that scenario that she was in is horrible. But it was like she had no control over that whatsoever, because that was a horse that was already shod and back in a stall. All of a sudden, boom, takes her out. So, it's like you truly, you can be as careful as possible, but things are still going to happen. So it's like I've made sure to have those living expenses saved up.
Yep, covered for at least that.
Right.
I can picture Andrew DeVisser listening to this in his van and fist pumping the air right now. That's right.
At least I got one fist bump.
There you go. So yeah, back to the other one. Who would you want to be stuck with?
I'm going to say my wife.
Oh, there you go.
It's been this June will be our 20th anniversary, a number of years before that together. And it's been amazing, and always having that support in my corner. I was kind of going through the list of farriers. It's like, screw that. I want to be stuck with Jen.
That's a pretty good answer. And she'd probably be pushing you to do all kinds of stuff in the shop too.
Yeah, and she's within earshot too.
Wow, the brownie points you earned tonight.
Maybe.
Amazing. Hilarious. Well, that was it. And thank you so much for doing that.
That was fun. So thank you. Thank you for asking. That was truly honored to do this with you.
I've told you a couple times that you've been on the list since I started doing this. I knew I wanted to sit down and do this with you. So
no, and I've enjoyed listening to them, and you put out a hell of a product. So it's kudos to you to take on a new endeavor, and you're doing a bang up job with it.
I appreciate that. Before I go, I wanted to say a few words about Shantae Stokes, CF. You heard me mention her accident in the interview with Mark, and Shantae is relatively young in her farrier career, and the medical expenses incurred during this accident have been pretty high. So we're setting up a GoFundMe page. Once it gets up and going, I will share it on my Facebook as well as the podcast's Facebook page, and I'm sure you will see it shared throughout the farrier community. I want to thank you in advance for any help that you send her way, and also thank all of the people who have reached out to Shantae and Allie Carpenter and offered to help her cover her books and keep her business going. Thanks to all of you. Until next time, please take care of yourselves and each other out there. We'll talk soon.